It's called a hard out, that little thing I do just before you listen to the 10 o'clock news. You can tell by the sort of rising pace of the music in the background. If I haven't got my words out in time, or if I'm sort of mid-sentence, there's nothing anyone can do to postpone the crescendo. And that it is a hard out. And twice this week I fluffed it, which I suppose I should probably apologise for, but I would also point out that I don't think you'd need your second hand. I don't think you'd need two hands to count the number of times I've completely fluffed it in the course of 20 years. And this is significant because it shows two things. It shows how carefully I am choosing my words at the moment, and it also shows how fallible we are, or I am, to getting things wrong. And the reason I stopped myself there, just if you noticed, you probably didn't, but trust me, well, someone did. I heard those hands hit the desk, James. That was a mixture of frustration and dismay, because I was about to say I feel equally sorry for all the dead people, or all the dead families, which wouldn't make sense. Can you feel sorry for someone who's already dead? Of course you can't. So I just got into a bit of a mess. But, of course, the notion of conflation or equation is one that's been stalking us all week, conflating everyone in Palestine. Do you know half of the humans in the Gaza Strip are children? The population spread is probably unique in the world. Half of them are children. So conflating everybody in the Gaza Strip with the monsters of Hamas is, just not just a mistake. I think it's pretty much disgusting. And as I glance to my right at some of the screens that are all week displaying scenes of utter devastation, I learn that the death toll on both sides, and I don't know why I've got a problem with that word sides in this context. I think perhaps it's relevant to the points I'm about to make, are now more or less equal, so that there are estimated to be 1,200 dead human beings on both sides. I use the phrase human beings advisedly. Well, what do you say? 1,200 dead Arabs, 1,200 dead Israelis, 1,200 dead Jews, 1,200 dead Muslims, 1,200 dead people. There are 2,400 dead human beings. The massive, massive, massive majority of whom will never have held a weapon in anger. The massive majority, 240, I think, bodies now recovered from the site of that music festival. And the scenes in the Gaza Strip. To my left, on another screen, there's a small child being operated upon in a tent. I think his brother's already dead, and they're trying to remove shrapnel from him. And I find myself today, Thursday, fourth day running, I find myself today wondering about people who perhaps have been a little bit ignored by all the coverage that we've done so far and by all the conversations that we've had so far. On this programme, 2, 4, 5 hours so far out of 9 that we've spent together, and another one coming now, which will make it 6 out of 10, maybe 2 hours coming. All being well, we'll do Mystery Hour, but it, of course, depends upon what unfolds in the next 2 hours. But that's an astonishing amount of energy and time dedicated to a story. It's quite apposite. It's entirely appropriate. Make no mistake about that. But it occurred to me this morning that many people, probably the vast majority of people, are not part of the conversation yet. Because we have heard from people expressing outrage and experience and solidarity with Israelis. And we have heard from a few people with whom I think I've been correctly impatient, but possibly a bit too impatient, I'm not sure, who are keen to remind us of the horrors and the privations suffered by people in the Gaza Strip on a daily basis, on a regular basis. And of course, for the massive majority of people listening to this, I don't think it matters what sign a baby was born under to you. I don't think your feelings are defined by the nationality or the ethnicity or the origins of a child, are they? And mine aren't. And yet, even as I say those words out loud, I worry that I might upset someone. I don't know why I'm worried about that, but I take a lot of calls. Some come from places of anger that I don't understand. It was a very odd opening to yesterday's show, which was interesting because I moved on from a sort of a personal attack without finding out whether or not the attack was coming from someone who would describe themselves as a staunch supporter of Israel or a staunch supporter of Palestinians. It didn't really matter, did it? I think that's the thing about incoherent anger, is that it's almost impossible to analyse. And judging by my inbox, it could easily have come from either quote side, end quotes. But I sometimes feel, I don't know whether you feel like this. I don't know whether you feel like this, but I almost feel reluctant to say I don't care what sign a child is born on, or an adult, to be honest with you. I think, brook nothing in the pursuit of the actual attackers, the actual terrorists. But how many children in Palestine have to die before we start wondering about the language that we're using there? I don't think there's much dispute today about international law being breached. The deliberate cessation of supplying electricity or water or whatever it may be. The siege, I think, is against international law. I think it's a war crime. And yet, in this country, I mean, look, inevitably, I'd love to live in a country where there was some event so awful that people managed to park their own petty prejudices. But no, if you've got a problem with the BBC, you're going to be talking about the BBC more than you're talking about dead children. Even the Football Association is coming in for a kicking now, although quite how you can display the flag of one nation while it is embarked upon a mission to raise a territory where half of the population are children to the ground is a question I don't think that football authorities should be asked to answer. Personally, it's a little bit ridiculous. But I don't know why I feel as if there is something wrong, potentially, about saying that I feel equally sad. It's just awful. It's utterly awful. 1,200 souls on both sides of that fence. Dead. And I don't see any difference emotionally in my response. And I think that the conversations we've had so far have... I guess part of my problem is that I think most of the people that we've spoken to... No, that's not fair. I think a lot of people with that personal investment in these issues does feel differently. I think that clearly people have a different reaction to a killing according to their own fealties, according to their own loyalties. And yet surely the massive, massive, massive majority of us are as devastated by the death of a Palestinian child as we are by the death of an Israeli child. Why does it... I don't know if this is a phone-in topic. There's only one way to find out. Why does it feel like that's a controversial thing to say? And I am going to allow myself... I don't think it's quite arrogance, but let's call it conceit. I am going to allow myself the conceit of suggesting that because of what I do for a living, I think about words a little bit more than the average Joe, all right? It's why I fluffed my introduction this morning, and it's why I fluffed my introduction on Tuesday, because I am thinking too hard about words when I should actually be saying them. I should have a clearer idea of what I'm going to say on air. I want you to tell me why you think I feel that saying I'm equally devastated by deaths on both sides of that fence is somehow a controversial or a potentially provocative thing to say. The number you need is 0345 6060 973. Two articles. I've made some suggestions and some recommendations this week. I'll do the same now. They're both at the top of my Twitter feed. They're both at the top of at Mr. James OB is my Twitter feed. One is a statement from Bernie Sanders, who I think walks a very careful line on issues that are adjacent to what I've just sought to introduce to you. And the second is a superb article by Yuval Noah Harari in today's Guardian that he praises it himself as Israel is livid with pain, fear and anger. Many of the forces in the region are currently led by irresponsible religious fanatics. External forces must intervene to de-escalate the conflict. Now, de-escalate the conflict today means encouraging Israel to moderate its response or to, fall short of war crimes. And the other article, the statement from Bernie Sanders says similarly, right now the international community must focus on reducing humanitarian suffering and protecting innocent people on both sides of this conflict. The targeting of civilians is a war crime, no matter who does it. Israel's blanket denial of food, water and other necessities to Gaza is a serious violation of international law and will do nothing but harm innocent civilians. The United States has rightly offered solidarity and support to Israel in responding to Hamas's attack, but we must also insist on restraint from Israeli forces attacking Gaza and work to secure UN humanitarian access. Let us not forget that half of the 2 million people in Gaza are children. And lest you think that Bernie Sanders is showing favour or preference or bias, I can tell you that he isn't. He's clear about the atrocity, the atrociousness of what happened at the weekend. But that's the strange one for me today. And I don't think Alan in Belfast needs this explaining. This isn't a conversation about me. It's a conversation about language and a conversation about neutrality almost. No, you can't be neutral about acts of terror. You can't be neutral about atrocities. But if it feels almost as if we're being ordered or expected to look upon one mode of killing as morally inferior or superior to another mode of killing. And the longer this goes on, I think the more troubling that becomes. And the final glance towards the 3 or 4 screens that I have running in front of me while I talk to you contains the headline, Israel readies for possible invasion of Gaza. So there are currently 1,200 dead souls, 1,200 dead human beings on both sides of this divide, and it's barely started. It is 20 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So why does it feel as if there's an atmosphere of censorship almost, and that saying I feel as sad about that death as I do about that death has almost been rendered controversial? I suppose I'm asking whether you recognise what I'm describing, so I'm grateful to everyone who's already texted in thanking me for managing to articulate what you've been feeling. Well, I didn't do it in the introduction, did I? In the bit before the news. Roy is in Liverpool to kick things off. Roy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call. I'm in a bit of a strange situation because I've been to Israel a lot. I worked on a cruise ship that used to take passengers around the Holy Lands.
Yes, gosh.
And so we interacted with both Palestinians and Israelis, And the people that I interacted with were absolutely lovely. And they didn't hate each other at all. I think politics has just so got in the way of this, because these people, all they want to do is exist in a country. And it just makes me so sad that it's got to this situation, because, and I work with a couple on the ship that one girl, Mary, she was Israeli, and Hamid was Palestinian. They got married.
That's incredible, isn't it, really? I mean, so simple and so sort of unspectacular in its way, and yet so, especially this week, so utterly traffic stopping in its simplicity.
Yeah. And it is, and the love that they had for each other just transcended everything. You could see that the love that they had for each other in their eyes, and it kind of, I'm kind of well up here because of the situation that they must be in now. Just makes me so sad.
I mean, you can't even imagine, can you? Where they would, except possibly they sit where we're sitting. They're sitting in a place of shared humanity and despairing at the events, at what's happening. But that sense, do you know what I mean when I say I feel somehow as if it's controversial to say I feel equal despair at all the deaths? Somehow you're supposed to...
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a sense, isn't there, abroad, that you're supposed to have a deeper response, a bigger response.
Yeah. But the thing is, you can't have a deeper response from one side or the other.
I don't think you can.
No, they're both. I don't know. Like I said earlier, I think politics has just got in the way of humanity, and I think if two human people would sit down and discuss this, potentially
that's where there's a Haaretz editorial that was very strong on the almost deliberate policy pursued by Benjamin Netanyahu of not doing that, of kind of favouring Hamas over the Palestinian Authority, because this cycle of reciprocal violence is politically beneficial to him, which is another example of why it is so ridiculous to look upon this as a sort of black and white, good and evil issue, although, I mean, the actions of Hamas this weekend, I think we can all safely agree, are evil. And it's not from one side or the other, by the way, that I think this sense of is coming, this idea that you should not see the deaths as being equivalent, morally equivalent or emotionally equivalent. I get it from both sides. I'm not suggesting for a minute that this feeling is promoted by exclusively Israelis or exclusively Palestinians. But some people are... See, here's the thing. Samuel has texted to say, it's just called being human, James. And John says, in the same moment, in the same minute, having listened to exactly the same 20 minutes of radio, it's false equivalence to say the number of deaths are the same and that the blame should be the same. I haven't used the word blame, John. Only you've done that. It ignores the fact that these attacks and this level of escalation was clearly down to Hamas and probably other West-hating international actors. And it also ignores the deliberate and horrific sadism involved. We touched on that yesterday. The Daily Mail today got a really odd article about the decision they took to write about babies being beheaded, and then complaining that later in the day there was some questions surrounding the origins of that claim, the origins of that story. But it is important. It is important. If that level of performative cruelty is relevant to a conversation, if it has happened, it changes how you feel about a story. And I don't understand why. An anonymous missile drops on a building and 10 children are dead, 40 babies are killed. Feels different. We talked about it yesterday. There is a different emotional reaction. So I disagree with you, John, on that. I'm going to go with the fellow who wrote It's Just Called Being Human, James. I'm going with Samuel on that one, if that's all right with you. They are not equivalent, whatever the statistics may be. Well, they should be. There's a dead child. and there's another dead child. It does feel different, according to how it happened, but I'm not sure it should. Alison is in Bury St Edmunds. Alison, what would you like to say?
Hi, lovely to talk to you again. Well, firstly, I think I've listened to this show for the last week, and I think he's shown compassion. I think he's shown empathy, and I don't think we should feel guilty for saying that it's equal on both sides, i.e., the children dying in Israel.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should either. But I sense. I sense what should be the least controversial comment of all is in the current context somehow controversial in some ears. Well, it is
exactly.
Clearly. John's just proved that, hasn't he, in that text I read out?
Exactly. And I think if you look back at, because I don't condone what Hamas did.
Good.
I don't.
You'd be straight off the phone
totally.
if you did. If you did, by the way.
Exactly. I don't agree with what, and this may sound controversial, with what the Israelis did in retaliating. I think what they should have done was locked Israel down, tried to get rid of Hamas, and dealt with it in a different way. But that doesn't happen. Like a previous caller said, politics has now got involved. I mean, we can go back into the 1970s where the IRA were bombing the UK. Did we go and bomb Ireland? No, we didn't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, that's where I stand. And I tell anybody, I don't feel guilty for saying it's disgusting on both sides. But what Israel are doing now is going in again and again and again. And this may sound controversial again.
Well, because as long as it's honest.
Been able to do that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Hamas have not done that. They've kind of... and they are killing innocent children. They're doing exactly what Hamas did, so they're coming down to their level.
Well,
Are the Israelis terrorists?
The moral difference would be, and I think it's pretty flimsy, but it would be that any children dying in the Gaza Strip at the moment are collateral damage caused by the pursuit of Hamas terrorists.
No, I don't agree. No, that's disgusting.
I mean, it's an intellectually sustainable position, and the children killed by Hamas were deliberately targeted and killed in truly barbaric and very deliberate ways. So I suppose you could argue that there is a reluctance, but a sense of necessity behind the Israeli actions, whereas there is a relish, a bloodlust, a vile relish in the actions of the Hamas terrorists at the weekend. So there's a difference. There's a difference for you.
Well, but don't you think by doing that and saying that it was almost, well, pretty much, I mean, I'm putting it in a layman's sense, it was okay for Israel to go in, that we are actually, condoning it again, and the politicising of it has to, well, we can't get it out. It's been there since, after World War II and World War I, when, Israel, now we know is called Israel, was called Palestine, and it was made smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's what gets us here today. It doesn't justify anything, but it gives the justification.
I mean, that would be a case made, of course, by some people in the mix, but I think also probably it's fair to say that Hamas leaders relish the instability and the reciprocation of violence in just the way that Benjamin Netanyahu has been accused of doing by some Israeli commentators, by favouring Hamas, sort of quotes, governing, end quotes, the Gaza Strip over other options. I mean, there it is. 10:30 is the time. Thank you, Alison. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, trying to walk a tightrope with some success. But I suppose I should say, given that this is the fourth day that we've been talking about this, as I try to walk that tightrope, thank you for being the safety net. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 10:34 is the time. Just by way of illustration, I don't want to over-egg the pudding or labour the point, but I think it's important and I think it's pertinent. So here's a text that came in at 10:30. It didn't take O'Brien long to show his anti-Israel stance. As that woman said yesterday, he's just stoking his own ego. And here, I mean, to be fair to Richard Harris, at least he's got the courage to put his name to his comments. He writes in exactly the same moment, literally at 10:30, no matter how much you pretend to sound balanced, your bias towards Israel still shows. So there we are, 30 minutes of radio. My bias towards Israel is absolutely crystal clear to one listener, and my bias against Israel is absolutely crystal clear to another. And maybe that's the answer to the question of why it feels controversial to suggest that our reaction to deaths is for most people is the same. I feel as sad about a Palestinian child dying in a missile blast as I do about an Israeli child dying in a terror attack. I just do. Suzanne's in Cardiff. Suzanne, what would you like to say?
Hi, thank you very much for taking the call. I feel that for years and years, the media have kind of ignored the humanitarian disaster that is the lives of your average Palestinian. And I do believe that Israel, and I'm going to sound pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel here,
go on then.
I feel that Israel have been condemned by the UN and World Health Organization for years for committing war crimes against the Palestinian people, but no action is ever taken against them. There aren't sanctions against them. And so it just continues this narrative that Palestine is full of terrorists and they're all terrorists, and what happens to them is being brought upon them by their own behaviours.
And that's why Bernie Sanders' line about half of the people in the Gaza Strip being children stops you in your tracks a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because what does that say? That the majority of maybe adult males of fighting age have either been captured, held prisoners, as prisoners of war by Israel. And I don't know, I obviously don't condone what Hamas did and how Hamas has acted, but in the same way I can't condone also what Israel are now doing in Palestine. I feel like there hasn't, and people are saying that, but they voted for Hamas, the Palestinian people voted for them. There hasn't been a democratic election in Palestine since 2006, 2007. They may have been who they voted in at that time, and they got in by a small majority, but there hasn't been an election since. So the people of Palestine are as much being held prisoner by Hamas as they are by Israel.
I think that's often overlooked as well, and of course that's the thing about terror, isn't it? That terror rising is indiscriminate, and that's why we go back to the William Hague article that we talked about a lot on Tuesday, suggesting that the hope of Hamas is to cause the kind of response that Israel now seems set to deliver. That is, Hague described it as a trap into which Israel must not fall. But I don't know whether people would agree with that. I don't know how many people are sort of fully supportive, full-throatedly supportive of what appears to be an imminent ground invasion. 10:38 is the time. Thank you, Suzanne. Victoria is in Leighton Buzzard. Victoria, what would you like to say?
Hello, thank you for taking the call.
You're very welcome.
I want to say that it's heartbreaking seeing innocent young people and children being killed on both sides. Every single life is of equal value, and that's why we have the Charter of the United Nations, and that's why we have international law, and that's why we have things like war crimes, because every life is seen as equal. But I think it's really important to understand some of the background. We get this huge confusion between Zionism and Judaism. There are many Jewish groups who've been fighting for Palestinian rights, but we also need to understand the sheer sense of fear that many Israelis have. There are many nations around them that don't recognize Israel, and that leads to a huge sense of fear. And then on the Palestinian side...
It goes beyond that. There are forces dedicated to the eradication of Israel, of course, on their own doorstep.
Exactly, but then on the Palestinian side, there's a sense of betrayal. But beneath all of this, there are big issues with the shortage of water in Israel, the resources on water, how land is used, and what type of lifestyle goes on. Because my godmother was Palestinian, and my parents lived for a year in East Jerusalem in 1967, just before the June War, and that was the reason they came. They so loved it there because there was such the way everybody got on, the way the Jews and Arabs lived in complete harmony, and it was, they're two very, very similar religions in many ways. And what's tragic is as things have changed, that you've had more and more division, and putting people behind walls doesn't work. And as people get more and more separated from each other, they understand each other less, and then you get more and more hatred. There've been lots of brilliant programs in the West Bank of music and getting orchestras with Israelis and Palestinians playing together to break down the barriers. So I would just passionately pray that we all work towards trying to understand that actually there's a huge amount of similarity between Christianity, Islam and Judaism. They're three very, very similar religions.
Abrahamic, aren't they? But how relevant is religion to this, really? I've seen the Hamas motivations described as blood and soil nationalism, which is, blood and soil is a phrase popularised, I think, by the Nazis. So I don't know how much religion actually has to do with it anymore. It's another very faint reflection of the situation in Ireland.
I think religion confuses the issues because people who feel under threat from anti-Semitism then begin to feel that attacking Israel is another form of anti-Semitism.
Yes,
and that's a religion.
Which it can be, of course. I mean, even I think the best way it was explained to me was if you're reserving criticisms for Israel's actions while not criticising other countries undertaking identical or very, very similar actions in exactly the same way, then there is there's a quiet anti-Semitism behind that motivation.
Yeah, yes, and that's one of the reasons. That argument is exactly why you were saying earlier that you feel, it's you almost feel very brave to say that a Palestinian life has worked.
Not brave. I never use the word brave.
No, but I feel it because. Okay. I'm very conscious. I'm a local councillor in Leighton Buzzard, and I feel speaking out on this could provoke the most enormous backlash. Yet all I'm actually saying is I get very upset when children are killed.
And that's it. There it is. And why would that be in any way loaded or controversial? I get very upset when children are killed, and I don't get more upset or less upset according to what sign those children were born under, or what flag. Yeah. Or what flag?
And I believe that every child and every young person has the right to grow up and develop their lives in peace. And I feel we're in a situation where both sides, both Israelis and Palestinians, aren't allowed to do that.
And there it is. And I think it's probably fair to briefly recognise where most of us would rather, if we had to choose between growing up on one side of the fence or the other, most of us would choose to grow up on the Israeli side for fairly obvious reasons, but the universality of that right, beautifully expressed, Victoria, thank you. At 10:43 is the time. I like this text. I'm just going to double check it before I read it out to you, because inevitably words are very important at the moment. Hi, James. I completely agree that the death of any human being is tragic. Death is not the goal on the Israeli side. It is a justifiable removal of Hamas, who were democratically elected in Gaza, whatever that means. On the Hamas side, it is a belief that they will be martyrs and go to heaven with virgins, even in committing heinous crimes in their deaths. Until their education from a young age changes, this war will continue. I mean, I read it out and I say that I liked it because it sums up quite a lot of the messages that are coming in, but cutting off electricity and water to 1 million children is pretty hard to see as justifiable in pursuit of terrorists. What would be the difference between the British government somehow cutting off electricity and water to Ireland or Catholic parts of Northern Ireland in response to IRA terror attacks? I don't know. I'm talking out loud, and I'm glad that we are. I'm glad that we all are. 10:45 is the time. It is 10:48 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation continues. And it looks at and it's a funny one, funny peculiar, obviously. Although speaking of funny ha-ha, I had a very odd experience at the top of the show this morning when I was tying myself in knots trying to negotiate this incredibly fraught territory. And my inbox briefly filled up with a succession of what could only be described as sort of end-of-peer jokes. And I thought, someone's got the wrong number. It must be one person just sending loads of jokes to a mate or something. So I looked at more closely, and there were lots of different numbers. So lots of people sending me very short jokes because they were texted, and apparently deliberately sending them to this program. I thought, what the hell is going on there? Well, I found out. I confided in my friend and colleague Chris Moyles this morning over at Radio X that I've injured my rib. I don't know if you've ever had a bruised rib or a cracked rib, but it's a horrible injury. But there's literally nothing you can do about it. You just have to sit with the pain, apparently, for 4 to 6 weeks until it heals naturally. You can't put splints on it. There's no point having an X-ray. I know exactly how I did it, but that doesn't moderate the pain. And obviously, Moyles is working on the presumption that and he's right, it hurts when I laugh a bit. So he was getting lots of people to say, thankfully, there was very, very little prospect of me laughing at all during that particular introduction to this particular programme. But the mystery of why anybody thought it was appropriate to send me end-of-peer style humour during that portion of the programme has thankfully been solved. And to be clear, Chris wouldn't have known what we were talking about at the time either, because he was still on air himself when he gave out the instruction to people to bully me in this way, in this foul way. 10 to 11 is the time. Back to the matter in hand, back to the conversation in hand. And it is that sense of inappropriateness or even controversy that comes when you frame the thought or articulate the thought that you are as sad or as devastated or as damaged by the thought of a death on one side of the Gaza-Israel conflict. If you're talking about Hamas-Israel, then I'm not conflicted at all. Hamas killers deserve whatever they get. But children in the Gaza Strip? Nah, just don't. How can that be a controversial thing to think or say? 10:51 is the time. John's in Chatham. John, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think you've really hit the nail on the head with a really interesting topic today. I work in communications for an international organisation, and I've found personally that trying to find the right words to convey what is happening here is so tricky and difficult. And words really matter here, because I think, and I agree with what your last caller said, that people are people. And in this situation, it is quite difficult for some people to see people as people. And it's really interesting. If you watch various news agencies across the world, you get different opinions on this. And, I think it's not been widely spoken about, but the EU did come out yesterday morning, Joseph Borrell, and say that what was happening in Gaza was wrong. But then you look at how it's been reported in other parts of the world, and it's quite a different reaction. And I think what we need to really think about here is looking not only in the situation, it's a very heated time at the moment. So how people react is emotional. And so that is, again, why words matter. But what is the language that gets you past that? How can you start to have a nuanced discussion and get past the idea that just violence is the answer?
Or an intellectual entrenchment as well. You need to get past that as well. If you're going to move towards the light, then you have to have a conversation, don't you, rather than just an exchange of slogans.
Well, absolutely. And whilst I'm not Jewish and have no relation to that region of the world, my mum is a white South African who moved to England in the 80s. My wife is a white Irish Catholic from Northern Ireland.
Right.
So the resolution of incredibly difficult situations and how it happened has been something that has made me think about my identity, my place in the world, what happened.
And the importance of words like terrorist, actually, in both of those contexts.
Well, exactly.
I think Thatcher called Mandela a terrorist, didn't she?
Well, it's a really difficult conversation, because if you think about it, at the time, the white ruling government, were the government and the ANC were the terrorists, despite the just cause. And for my mother, her brother died at the hands of what happened there. But you can't retaliate on that. You can't let your life be controlled by that, because for example, I was born in England. I think of myself as very British, James, but my mum took a conscious decision not to teach me Afrikaans as a child. She's an Afrikaner. She's not English. It's her second language.
Right.
But because she understood the importance of being able to look through that and see a bright future. My granddad died in 97. I was in South Africa in 95 for the Rugby World Cup. The joy that country felt at finally finding reconciliation, no matter how difficult it was,
yes,
was amazing. And then, on this weekend, I am flying to Northern Ireland to watch the GAA, which is, only a Catholic sport. I'll be the only Englishman in the stadium of 15,000 people. But I love the sport. I love Northern Ireland, and I'm accepted there because of what people did in Northern Ireland 20 years ago to reconcile through language. And I think
a peace process.
As difficult as it might be, Gerry Adams, who is obviously for various reasons incredibly controversial, and in using language, I think it's difficult to convey this. But he put out a tweet immediately on Saturday saying, "Dialogue. The key here is dialogue."
Crikey.
And I think we have to learn from the
we do.
People who are involved in those situations.
Well, yes, except that,
do that here.
No, except that this is where the promotion of Hamas has been so problematic, because there's not much evidence there that they've got the vaguest interest in negotiating, speaking specifically about Hamas, and recognising that they are not representative of the Palestinian people in the way that Adams was representative of the Republican movement in Ireland. But you remind us that however dark the tunnel might be, there is light at the end of it. Are you younger than me, John? You sound younger than me.
I'm nearly 40.
Everyone sounds younger. Everyone sounds younger than me these days. But when I was a kid, the prospect of peace in Northern Ireland would have been absolutely unthinkable, laughable. And of course, its historical roots, the historical roots of the Troubles and its colonial roots go back at least as far as some of the issues that we've discussed this week. Further, in fact, arguably. Thank you, John. That was really helpful, really thoughtful as well. Because a white South African, an Irish Catholic would have very different attitudes to the notion of what is a terrorist and what is not a terrorist than people on the other side of those historic divides. 10:57 is the time, which is why I think the BBC getting itself. I think what you look at when people are attacking the BBC for not using the word terrorist to describe what Hamas has done, John Simpson provided a thoughtful account of why it is. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but equally, I don't know how much it really matters. So I look at the identity of the person making the criticism, and if they have a long history of sucking at Rupert Murdoch's teat and attacking the BBC on his behalf, then I'd take their words with a cellar full of salt. But if they don't, if they are coming to the issue cold, as it were, or fresh, then they are definitely worth listening to and worth thinking about. Last word on this, I think. Joel is in Barnet. Joel, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'd just like to firstly say,
We've only got a minute and a half, Joel, to be clear.
First of all, I'm mourning the deaths of both innocent Palestinians and the Israeli victims of terror. And the thing that's really, I'm quite disgusted with is how people are trying to compare the reaction of Israel with the terrible terrorist attacks from Hamas by cutting off, the fuel, water, and electricity.
Well, it's not. It's the 1,200 deaths that people are comparing to the 1,200 deaths.
Well, the deaths on both sides are obviously awful, but
that's the comparison. No one's comparing the terror attack to the.
No. But what I'm trying to say is
to the
people
blockade.
Are blaming Israel for a humanitarian crisis which they're not responsible for, because Israel has been providing this fuel, water, electricity to Hamas, an organisation who have directly asked for their annihilation. They've been supplying for that for years.
Well, they've been again. Language is important. It's a legal requirement of the mid-2000s settlement, And it's supplying it to 2 million people, of whom 30,000 will be Hamas terrorists.
I know, and Hamas have been in charge of these Palestinian people, and instead of providing a good quality of life for them with the supplies that Israel have been given, they've been using this to fuel terrorism, to build military arms, to build weapons of destruction for Israel. So how can anyone blame Israel for stopping that from continuing?
Nobody really.
I don't think it will.
Nobody really has today, except to describe it as a war crime, which it is, I think, under international law. But the comparison, and I'm sorry, it's my fault. I thought this was clear, but clearly not clear enough. The comparison that we've been really exploring is the deaths, the comparison of a death to a death, not the comparison of an embargo on energy, a cessation of supply to a death. It may well be that they are war crimes under international law, but this conversation was not comparing cutting off a water supply to cutting off a head. And I suppose I have to apologise if that was the impression you got, although I suspect you're probably in a very small minority if it was, Joel. Take care. It's 11 o'clock. I think we'll talk about matters domestic after this. 3 minutes after 11 is the time, and we did a pretty good job, I think, of negotiating that fraught territory, but I do have to correct one claim made in the last hour. John in Chatham will definitely not be the only English person at the GAA final this weekend. Lots of you pointing out that you are also going, albeit I suspect you might have some Irish heritage, whereas John just has an Irish wife. And I'm not putting you in idiot's corner, Gordon, because perhaps I should have been clearer. He writes, the roots of the problems in Northern Ireland go back further than those in Palestine. Hey, the 11th century would be the earliest possible date for the beginnings of the Northern Irish problem. I perhaps, if I had said the modern state of Israel, Gordon, in which case you'd be confining it to 1948, I think, more or less, which is less recent than the roots of the troubles in Northern Ireland, or indeed the colonisation of Ireland by England. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. Not bad, really, that they were the two items of clarification after an hour that could have been... could have gone much worse, let's just say that. Now, we turn our attention next. There's two stories around today that speak to sort of similar themes. The one that I couldn't quite get my head around when I heard it yesterday was that the prisons are full. It's a phrase you just never expect to hear, isn't it? The prisons are full. The prisons are full. The Times reports that convicted rapists and burglars will be free to walk the streets from next week because the country's prisons are full. This is the United Kingdom in 2023, by the way. This isn't sort of some medieval kingdom in the year 1142. This is the UK. This is 13 years since the Conservatives came to power with their constant promises about law and order and whatever it may be. Convicted rapists and burglars will be free to walk the streets from next week because the country's prisons are full. This, I presume, is the Home Office's remit, isn't it? It's the Home Secretary banging on constantly about barges and pronouns when the prisons are actually full. Great. I don't know how to turn that into a phone-in subject. I mean, why are the prisons full? Answer, because they're full of prisoners, James. Why? How has this been permitted to happen? Well, I don't know. And when you look at the backlogs in the criminal justice system, not only are the prisons full, but they would be even fuller, if there can be such a thing, or there would be even more convicted rapists and burglars walking the streets next week if all of the people accused of rape and burglary were actually being put on trial within even a tiny time frame of being charged. So I don't know how it's a phone. I don't know how it's a phone-in. Sometimes when I say I don't know how it's a phone-in, I'm being a tiny bit cheeky. I'm being mischievous because I am going to turn it into a phone-in, but I'm just almost preening myself at the original creative approaches that we take to topics together on this programme. But I'm not doing that now, to be absolutely clear. How do you turn that into a phone-in? Rapists will go free as judges are told that prisons are full. Lord Justice Edis, the senior presiding judge for England and Wales, has ordered Crown Court judges to delay sentencing hearings which means unless you're on remand, you will be currently walking free for criminals who are on bail. So not on remand, on bail. So you're on bail, you've been bailed to return to court for sentencing, and now you're not going to return to court for sentencing because there is no room in prison. It means that offenders, convicted offenders, including some who have committed serious crimes, although I think, with my sketchy legal knowledge, I think that the judge in those cases would have taken a decision that they didn't pose a threat to the public. They will be temporarily spared jail. I got tweeted this yesterday, actually, by a barrister, Thomas, who rings in occasionally, and I did a double take. How the hell has that happened? But as I say, I don't know that... Oh, you know what's happened now, don't you? The phones have started ringing. And I genuinely wasn't doing it for that reason. Should we take some calls on this? Because this wasn't the phone-in that I was going to have. Actually, should we do both phone? Can we do both phone-ins? Should we do both phone? Because the other story, which also speaks to the arena of law and order, is about the Police Federation balloting the membership, balloting the rank and file. How many officers do you think there are in England and Wales? Just have a guess. Go on, say it. Just say a number out loud. Not if you're, listening on an earphone that your boss hasn't noticed yet or something like that. That'd just be weird. If you just sat there and went, I don't know, 500,000. How many officers do you think there are in England and Wales? Off the top of your head? 145,000. 145,000 officers in England and Wales will be balloted on whether or not they should seek the right to strike. Industrial rights, including the power to strike. I can't remember the full details of why they don't have the power to strike, but I think it was a sort of quid pro quo negotiated years ago under which you couldn't be made redundant, and in return for not being made redundant, you surrendered your right to strike. There's also, obviously, as with all of the public sector, pay disputes in play, but unlike the rest of the public sector, police officers don't have the right to withdraw their labour in protest at the paucity of the pay offer on the table. So actually, it's going to be up to you which way this goes. Why are the prisons full? Glancing at my screen and my inbox is perhaps not as silly a question as I thought it was. So we'll do a side order of why are the prisons full. 0345 6060973. I can't wait to hear Suella Braverman blame it on the woke mob or the Labour government of a decade and a half ago. Who do you think she's going to blame it on? Probably immigrants. I wonder why the prisons in this country are full. But the question I really want to focus on this hour is, should the police be able to strike? And I want you to answer that from both sides of the thin blue line. I don't know, actually, but I think they should. Well, I just said I don't know, and then I told you that I think they should. That was a bit of a contradiction. I don't know for sure. I don't have what you'd call a pungent position on this. But the more I look at the pay settlements that the public sector has had to endure for the last 15 years, really, or certainly the last 13 years, the more I think if you can't withdraw your labour, then some governments, not all, but some governments, i.e. the last 4 or 5 since 2010, they will treat you like mugs. If you don't, look at what's happened in the health service. You've had sections of the health service going on strike who have never gone on strike before. Firefighters have always reserved their right to take industrial action, and they have been right to do so, in my opinion. But the slow erosion of industrial rights in this country, undertaken since 1979, has actually changed the game. It's changed the way we look at things. When you speak to young people and they are not shocked by stuff that you're shocked by because it's all they've ever known. I always remember the aunt of a junior doctor talking to us about her nephew working at Christmas. And she said something that's really stayed with me, because you have an older doctor ringing in and describing the absolute horrors of what they have to go through at Christmas now when obviously demand rockets, and comparing it to what it was like 20 years ago. But we took a call from a lovely woman a few years ago, and she simply said, well, my nephew knows no difference. This is his second or third Christmas, I forget which. And that's all he's ever known. So he's a lot less shocked by what's happened. That's how you get away with decline, isn't it? Managed decline. Is that the people leaving who are stunned at how badly things have deteriorated are being replaced by people arriving who have never known any different. That might be relevant to the conversation about prisons as well and why they're full. But the twin topic this hour will be, why are the prisons full and should the police be able to go on strike? If you want to argue that they shouldn't, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And incredibly, if you want to argue that you should be able to go on strike as a police officer or as a civilian, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. The number is the same regardless of which opinion you hold. 12 minutes after 11 is the time. Let's start before the break, shall we? Start before the junction. Peter's in Ipswich. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I'm not a first-time caller, but
thanks for clearing that up, Peter.
So basically, what happens is I actually work for the Ministry of Justice, and I work within a department that oversees population management, not nationally, but at a local level. And we've seen this situation building and building and building. And so I am not surprised that we are where we are. Now, there's several reasons, and there's probably more than that why the prisons are all full. In my area, there is one prison, high security prison, that they've had to decant a high number of prisoners, because they don't have the staff to manage them. And the reason they don't have the staff to manage them, what's been filtered down to me is there's no experience on the landings. People are now joining the job and going, don't really want to be assaulted,
But hang on. So staffing issues it's not just space then? It's not that we've run out of cells. There's a limit to how many prisoners can be accommodated that is determined by the number of officers that can accommodate them.
Right. That's basically it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you were listening today, Peter.
Yeah. So if you've got a wing, and let's just say, for argument's sake, it takes 20 officers on the complete shift system to run it. If that can't be run, then you have to move the prisoner somewhere else. You can't just leave them there, leave them locked up, and have no right to food, exercise, and so forth. Contact with the family, visits and all that. That all takes manpower. And if you haven't got that manpower, then clearly that's one of the biggest issues. And at this prison that I won't name, but is local to me, is near me, so they've decanted several wings or units, whatever they call them these days, and they've dispersed the prisoners around the prison because of assaults on staff and high levels of disruption. Now that then, all them prisoners will go into the vacancies where there's just a few here and there, and that then clogs up the system. So what we're actually doing is shutting units down because we don't have the experience and we don't have the staff. And then obviously they get pushed into where there are enough staff to do it, sent to another prison. The other prison that sent them may have 2 or 3 units that are empty, but because they haven't got the staff, they can't run it. A bit like the NHS with beds, isn't it? You can build as many wards as you like. If you have insufficient staff, then you can't run them.
Yeah, I mean, so there's no real... I'm using this phrase too much at the moment, but I suppose that's interesting in and of itself. There's no light at the end of the tunnel here. No obvious light at the end of the tunnel, is there?
No.
And in fact, the solution to the problem would in many ways exacerbate it, because the only way you're going to fill staffing vacancies is by bringing in more inexperienced people. How much of this, Peter, and don't pull your punches, how much of this is Chris Grayling's fault?
What, on percentage?
Don't make me laugh. My ribs are gone again.
Oh, dear.
This is murder.
Do you know what?
Today as well.
And then the other part of the programme, you were saying, should police and prison service, essential services, and even if you put that same sort of quandary to the military, nobody would say that the military can strike because of, for what they provide, the service they provide. Neither should the police, and neither should the prison service.
But the prison service can't they?
No, they can't. That
Can they not?
was taken away years and years ago. But what they should be doing is raising the standards and raising the wages, the financial inducement to work in these difficult jobs.
Right, and respect the job as well, but I don't think there's any votes in it, is there? The right wing just bang on about how we should lock them up and throw away the key, and there's no such thing as rehabilitation and yada, 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 which is probably part of the problem that you've addressed. And the left wing generally don't talk about it at all because they're frightened of getting monstered by the right wing media, who also want to throw away the key and lock them up and hang them and flog them. It is a poorly paid job being a prison officer. I've got a former prison governor coming up next. So he's a very, what's the word I want? Enthusiastic listener to LBC and always worth listening to. So we'll talk to John after this. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. John is in Cheltenham. John Podmore, I happen to know, is a former prison governor, so well placed to tell us, why are the prisons full, John?
Morning, James. A very enthusiastic listener. The prisons are full. There's kind of two things going on. One is that this sort of rhetoric of getting tough. It's well known that you can actually talk the prison population up, and we're now reaping this whirlwind of longer sentences and talking tough
and ignoring recidivism, ignoring the fact that the massive majority of people in prison have been there before. And if you could address reoffending, then you'd redress prison numbers in a heartbeat.
Yeah, basically the system is failing. There's been incompetence and mismanagement by ministers, and don't blame poor old Grayling all the time. Yeah, he has people before and after him who have been as bad.
Of course, yes.
But it's good fun. But there's two. We need to think about the prison population in two senses. The number of people in prison is a function of those coming in, and how the system gets people out. Now, the people coming in, and I think I've probably said this to you before, we lock up 80,000 people. We're locking up people. We should be locking up people we're afraid of, not that we're mad at. And if we look at that 80,000, how many of those are really dangerous? How many of those are a real threat to society? I'd put it probably at a guess at only about 30,000. So I think there's an opportunity here for us to, we can talk about how we got here, but we are where we are. How do we reduce the population here and now, not in the long term?
Yes,
and there's an opportunity to reflect on who we're locking up and why.
Yes, I take your point, but you're having a bit of a ride around the radio on your hobby horse here. And in terms of why they've got full against the backdrop of we've had the system in place for decades and it never got full before, what has happened?
Well, what's not happening is that the prison system is not functioning properly in getting people out the way it should.
Right.
Now, most prison sentences have a flexible component. And it's, put it in simple terms, it's about parole or various forms of early release. Now, you're only going to get those, you're only going to be released early if you have not got worse, if you've improved, if you've addressed your offending behaviour, if you're working. Now, I think your man before was actually wrong.
Okay.
If there are no staff, people just won't get unlocked. And if you read all of Charlie Taylor's reports, people aren't getting unlocked, people aren't getting out, people aren't working, people are being held in.
So staffing shortages won't affect capacity.
No, not in my view.
Okay.
There aren't wings. In my view, there aren't wings being decanted because there aren't enough staff. If there aren't enough staff, the prisoners don't get unlocked.
Sure.
And Charlie Taylor.
They just stay in their cells for 23 hours a day.
Yeah, but a good example. There's something called approved premises. So if you've been granted a release by the parole board, then a lot of serious offenders need to go through something called approved premises. Now, there are people in prison waiting to get out through these approved premises, but there aren't the spaces. So, if we built more approved premises, there are people who are eligible for home detention curfew, what you and I would see as tagging. Now, you can only be released early on a tag if you've got somewhere to go. And if we had a properly functioning probation service, because the probation service is in crisis and Grayling has got dirty hands on that one, then prisoners will be released. But there are also, remand, for example. We've got 14,000 people on remand now.
God. So if they were all
10%.
locked up, well, they simply couldn't be. Well, so, I mean, I appreciate your interest is in the long-term solutions to this, but if I wanted to fix it, like within
Today,
one...
Right, let me tell you now.
Briefly, if you would, John.
What I do, there are 3,000 women in prison, in 12 prisons. I'd let out 10 prisons worth and then put men in them. Because most women are not non-violent.
No, so there you go. I mean, you don't hear that very often from politicians, do you? Simple, easy to understand, and quite probably effective. Although, you know, the Daily Mail would no doubt find plenty of scaremongering territory to warn against why this woman shouldn't be allowed to walk the streets near you. Thank you, John. I'm in Cheltenham on Sunday, you know.
Right, may see you there then.
I hope so. At the Literary Festival, still a few tickets left, I think, or there were this morning. It's pretty much the only gig I'm doing with the new book that hasn't sold out already. It is 11:20, because it's a massive room is why. It's 11:25 is the time. I like this. James, I've been listening on Catch Up. I missed the first half hour of your show because I was listening to Chris Moore's on playback and he was talking about your ribs. What have I missed? I can't do bespoke catch-ups, Ben, on what you've missed in the programme, but we were having a very sensitive conversation about casualties in Gaza and in Israel. But I mean, the rib thing, Sam says, what did you do to hurt your rib, James? I hurt mine attempting my first back roll with a kite surf. I went big and did a 540-degree rotation instead of 360 and hit the sea at high speed, ribs first. It was so painful, so I can commiserate. Why don't you share your story? Well, Sam, you're not going to believe this, but it's exactly the same. I too was attempting my first back roll on a kite surf, and I went too big, did a 540-degree rotation instead of a 360. No, I didn't. I was trying to dismantle a paddling pool. Oh, it's not actually a paddling pool. It's a massive pool, like a swimming pool, like a massive paddling pool, but big enough to swim in, which we bought this summer. Quite reasonably priced. It's the heater that's expensive, but a mate lent us his. So I was leaning over the edge of it and trying to pull the net out because I'd emptied it of water and the net was still in it. So I'm leaning over the edge of it and even now it hurts. And I felt something go. It was like that. So it's quite possibly cracked. Well, I think it is cracked, and there's not a lot you can do about it. So that's how. I mean, it's not even a cool story, is it? Particularly, it's just embarrassing, frankly. Let's take another call on prisons. Sam's in Farnham. Sam, what do you reckon?
Hi there. I've been a prison officer for about 10 years. And come out of there working in London jail. But a lot of the foreigners are in these London jails, and there's a massive backlog. I was about 40% in one of the big jails in the country.
Crikey.
And, so
they should be they should be removed to prisons in their countries of origin.
That's right. So to get repatriated...
I think it's 12% nationally is the population the prison population that wasn't born here.
Yeah, so one London jail...
so 12%, not 40.
It's 40% in one jail. There's 1,600 prisoners in, let's say, Wandsworth prison, 1,600 prisoners, and 40% of those prisoners are foreign nationals. Yeah,
but if it's 12% nationally, that's just a decision of where they've been put, isn't it? It doesn't matter what the percentage is in a given prison. You have to look at the national prison population. And of those 9,797 foreign nationals at the end of 2022... it would be a relatively small proportion that were viable for deportation. And then you've got 14,000 people on remand. So that you've got more prisoners on remand now than there are foreigners in the whole of the British prison population. So I'm not sure that it is quite the significant factor that you argue.
I mean, no, I'm just thinking, a lot of the prisoners that I talk to, so why are you getting, why have you been arrested? I said, I've been here, I'm Polish, and I've been here for, 10 years. And they come to my door and arrested me because there was a warrant for my arrest from Poland. Crikey. So what have you done? He said, I haven't paid my phone bills. And I said, what do you mean you haven't paid your phone bills? He said, I haven't paid my mobile phone bills. So in Poland, that is a arrestable offence.
We need some statistics on how much of the prison population is a consequence of people in Poland not paying their mobile phone bills. I don't know where you'd begin to find that. Matt did his ribs sneezing. That's also quite a common condition, I'm told, but possibly even more rubbish than injuring yourself on a giant paddling pool. 11:30 is the time. We'll turn our attention next to the question of whether or not the police should be allowed to strike. Okay, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. We're also going to catch up with Professor Anthony King, the Professor of War Studies, who's helped us out quite a lot with matters Ukrainian, on what is likely to unfold, or what war would look like, if that's the right word to use, in the Gaza Strip. But the question of what... Stop sending me jokes, all right, by text. It's not funny anymore. Well, it wasn't funny to start with. But whether or not the police should be allowed to go on strike. You are a police officer. Don't worry about the broader context of this. Do you want the right to go on strike? 0345 6060 973. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines. It is 11:34 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we will turn our attention shortly to the question of whether or not... I'm getting a lot of rib-based action coming into the studio, which is nice. There is very, very little you can do about it, and except live with the pain. I'm going to be a very brave little soldier, but you'll allow me to keep you posted when it becomes unbearable, if that's a correct word to use. But before we get stuck into whether or not police officers should go on strike, Professor Anthony King is the newly installed Professor of Security Studies at Exeter University, having previously been the Professor of War Studies at Warwick University. And I thought he might be a helpful contributor to a conversation that we've touched on in the course of this week with regard to the Gaza Strip in particular, and the probably imminent Israeli invasion, in terms of what is likely to happen next. So we'll begin, Anthony, and congratulations on your new post. We'll begin with the question of whether or not imminent is the right word to use, and indeed, is invasion the right word to use?
Well, certainly imminent. I absolutely agree with you. I think the Israelis have quickly gone, to these terrible airstrikes in response to an absolutely appalling atrocity. And I think with the build-up of ground forces, I think it's pretty likely that they're going to keep their momentum going in terms of demonstrating their potency, both to their own citizens and to Hamas and to Palestinian civilians, unfortunately. So I think an action, and a land action, i.e. soldiers going into Gaza, making an incursion to Gaza, is I would say, certain.
Yeah.
Now, invasion I'm less certain about. Okay. It is possible the Israeli Defense Force could go for a complete clearance operation, a clearance and occupation operation. But I'm sceptical, and I'm sceptical because I don't see what that would do for them. And remember that they were occupying Gaza from 1967 to 2005 and withdrew because it was an unviable and unconstructive situation. So I think what's more likely is a series of heavy raids into Gaza with pretty heavy forces, tanks, armoured vehicles, to destroy and interdict tunnel systems. There's a very complicated, intricate tunnel system which Hamas have used and constructed and used. And I would expect some heavy raids from the brigades around Gaza Strip. So rather than an invasion, a sort of a siege with a series of heavy raids from the ground, supported by air bombardments, which we've already seen.
And I saw the senior spokesman saying they were focusing more on damage than accuracy with regards to the air bombardments. That wouldn't extend to land operations, presumably. Well, they'd be quite specifically targeted, you think?
Well, I think that we're not part of the plans, but I think they'll go for a series of, when I say specific raids, yes, I think they have specific objectives like headquarters, arms caches, hostages, tunnel networks, etc., etc. But it's urban warfare. So, and the Hamas will obviously resist it, and they've shown, terrible cruelty, but also quite a lot of military sophistication. So they'll know this is coming, and they will defend those areas. And, the vision, I think, what we will see in the next few weeks, although I don't think it'll be a clearance operation, we're looking at something like Mosul 2016, 2017, Raqqa 2017, Aleppo in that same period, or Marawi over in the Philippines, where if security forces, military forces go into these urban areas and they're defended heavily and determinedly and skillfully by a militant group like Hamas, terrorist group, militant group, whatever we want to call it, the level of destruction is it's off the scale, frankly, because you get involved, you have to breach through the defensive positions, so that building gets destroyed, and then you move on to the next building. So, we're looking at something that really is, pretty dismaying. From the Israeli state point, one can see the policy point, but I think we've got to prepare ourselves for something that's going to be pretty brutal, frankly.
And so I think you've answered this question already, but just to clarify, what would the end look like? What would?
Well, you see, this is a great question, and I personally think that Hamas, with Tehran as its backer, have actually, they put to Israel a very difficult politico-military conundrum, i.e. this. Okay, so Israel has got to respond to this level of atrocity, and it's got to respond militarily.
Yes.
But either an invasion and a clearance of Gaza and an occupation, or a series of raids, punitive raids, which I think are much more likely, ends up with Israel committing international humanitarian law crimes, etc., and therefore the Hamas generating precisely the kind of regional and international support it wants. And of course, Iran wants to break the links between Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Abraham Accord countries, which I'm pretty confident what is about to happen will do, because the scale of the devastation is going to be, I just don't see how the Israelis are going to avoid it. So it's a very concerning situation.
Yes. And finally, you haven't mentioned hostages, which I think is probably relevant, isn't it? Because under the description you've just provided, Anthony, it's hard to see how, I mean, is Israel going to try to rescue hostages, or would that be pie in the sky?
I think they probably will try to rescue hostages because they're civilians. I mean, hostage taking is something that Hamas and Hezbollah have adopted as a tactic over the last 15, 20 years, but it's typically been soldiers from the Israeli Defense Force. And the Israeli government has adopted a very hard line on that. Namely, they go absolutely all out to recover that hostage. But the view, the ultimate thing is they will not be leveraged by hostage taking. And ultimately, if those military hostages die, the Israeli government and the military have accepted it. I mean, they're angry and furious about it, but they accept it. So in terms of the civilian hostages, I think they will try and rescue them. But that's going to be, militarily, practically, I think that's going to be a very difficult mission indeed. So one fears for the lives of those hostages very deeply. I think it's a very terrible situation.
I don't think anyone would dispute that. Anthony King, Professor Anthony King, Professor of Security Studies at Exeter University, thank you very much indeed. And that I hesitate to use that phrase, it's not light at the end of the tunnel, is it? It's almost what will the end look like is a question that's almost too grim to contemplate. 11:42 very nearly is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Turn our attention next to the question of whether or not police, it could almost be a mystery hour question, couldn't it? Why are police not allowed to go on strike? I think the answer is because they are servants of the Crown rather than employees of anybody. Currently, officers have no right to strike because they are not technically employees, but servants of the Crown, which also means they can't be sacked unless there is a conduct issue. The Police Federation will not have taken this step lightly. Indeed, they've issued a statement saying this decision follows more than a decade of requesting the government to address police officers' poor working terms and conditions. Just a quick moment before we talk to Matt in Bermondsey. I've got some phone lines free on this as well if you are a copper and you want to tell me why you don't want to go on strike or why you do want the right to go on strike. 0345 6060 973. It's more small state stuff. You know, these vampires constantly banging on about small state. We need a smaller state. Well, I mean, what does a small state look like? It looks like a country where the prisons are full, where police officers are underpaid, where there aren't enough of them, where the public sectors are cut to the bone. Who wants a small state except people who are wealthy enough to pay for everything that was previously provided by taxes, previously paid for by taxes? I don't want to pay taxes, but I'll pay myself for the things that taxes provide for other people because I'm rich and they're poor. So why the hell do they deserve to get the kind of protections that I can afford to pay for myself? It's horrible ideologically, but it has been in the box seat of British politics for the best part of a decade and a half. Matt's in Bermondsey to steer us to the police striking question. What do you want to say, Matt?
Good morning, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Excellent. So I worked in the police for 4 years as a special constable, which is obviously an unpaid volunteer, and then for 9 months in the last year as a paid PC in a different force. Okay. And I quit the police last month.
Gosh. Why? Can I ask why? You don't have to tell me. It's not why you rang in.
Certainly, it's actually not related to the strikes thing, so if I can cover it at the end,
sure.
So just to go through this first. But you're quite correct, actually, that police constables it's in office, as you say, and that's the reason that they can't be made redundant. But the actual reason that police can't go on strike is that they did go on strike in 1918 and 1919, and these were extremely successful. They basically got almost everything they asked for, except the formation of a union. Following that second strike, the government passed an act of parliament which actually forbade the police from striking, made advocating disaffection a criminal offence. So even if you're not a police officer and you advocate for a strike, then that is a criminal offence. And further established the police
What do you mean it's... just slow down a bit. What do you mean it's a criminal offence to advocate for striking?
Yeah, so if you advocate disaffection within the police, if you say that they should do so, then that is a criminal offence.
But I just did that.
I
didn't say they should go on strike. I didn't say they should go on strike, just in case anyone's thinking of reporting me. I said they should have the right to go on strike. Does that count as advocating for disaffection?
I think because you're not actually explicitly saying they should do it, I think it's okay.
I might have done. I can't remember now. Thank God there's no rewind function. Oh, my days.
But they established the Police Federation as a professional body then to represent the police in lieu of a union, but it's obviously not one.
Yes.
Yeah. So I understand, in terms of my opinion on this, I understand why the Act was passed at the time, because it was very impactful that they had. In an ideal circumstance, I don't think it should be necessary that the police should strike due to that impact. But the unfortunate reality, as you alluded to before, is that the government over the last 13 years has let police officers down in terms of cuts to pay, almost 20%. In terms of working conditions, with police becoming the service of last resort, as the rest of the public sector has been brought to its knees with the lack of funding, with increasing workloads being barely managed by officers who once upon a time was a career for life, and now it's a career that people stay in for.
Do you feel, clearly you were quite disaffected quite quickly having joined the force, or I presume so, but do you feel that the successive Tory governments have just almost not laughed at police officers, but just taken advantage of the fact that you have no recourse?
I think that's a reasonable way to summarise it. Yeah, I think that the social contract in that respect has broken down over the last 13 years.
I suppose this isn't really in their defence, because it just is an accusation of a different sort of stupidity, but they haven't exactly buckled or accommodated the demands of public sector staff who have gone on strike and who can go on strike. So I suppose you could argue it doesn't matter whether you can go on strike or not. They're going to ignore you either way.
I think it's been more... The agencies and the organisations that have been able to strike in the public sector have had more success than the police in terms of seeking pay rises, in terms of seeking working conditions, than the police who haven't been able to strike.
So, as you said you would, just talk us through why you had such a brief period in uniform.
Yeah. To be honest, it's quite a personal story, which I'm happy to share. But
no, don't worry. So it wasn't to do with the pay or conditions of being a police officer. It was your personal circumstance.
I left because of the latter there. But basically, I have ADHD, unmedicated ADHD.
Okay.
And,
well, I'm very sorry for telling you to slow down in that case.
No problem at all. It's just how I am, unfortunately. But so I was able to do the job for 4 years as a special constable. But when I got to my new force as a paid officer, I did the training. The training was absolutely fine. I even ironically won the best recruit in my intake award based on kind of my prior knowledge. But I say it's ironic because when I actually got onto my posting, it transpired that I simply wasn't able to do the job in that environment.
Mate. I'm sorry to hear that.
It's okay. Basically, I didn't have the focus and I didn't have the... so I was good at certain things. I could do the paperwork really well, but in terms of being out and present and reactive as a police officer, I just wasn't able to do it in that environment.
I understand.
I have to say the job was brilliant about it, because you hear the concerns that the stories in respect of organisations where people have ADHD. Some people are mistreated by it, and I have to say my force was brilliant, absolutely brilliant about it. But I was put on restricted duties, and unfortunately, because of the delay with ADHD medication, it would have been 12 months or longer to actually get it realistically.
But yeah, that's a topic we must touch on, actually. There's big issues, isn't there, regarding ADHD medication and supplies. Yeah. Just to clarify then, Matt, police officers aren't allowed to talk to me. Serving police officers aren't allowed to talk to me about going on strike.
If they were to advocate for it,
So I've literally just said, give me a ring if you want to have the right to go on strike. I mean, it'd be a bit of a tightrope. This might be up there with the time I nearly did a phone-in for people who don't have phones. I've because please don't read my name, says this chap whose name I very nearly just read, or chap-s, it could be, of course. I'm a serving police officer, and I can confirm that it is a criminal offence for me even to discuss striking. I am not currently discussing it for the avoidance of doubt. I am simply answering your question. So this is probably the worst phone-in topic in history since the time I nearly asked people who hadn't got a phone to ring me and tell me what it was like to live without a phone. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. But so I just want to say as well, the reason I left specifically, because my force was brilliant. They were willing to keep me on duties until I was able to get that support that I needed. But I couldn't sit in the office and just listen to my colleagues.
And twiddle your thumbs.
I couldn't help them, exactly.
No, I hear you, mate.
I was able to do paperwork and that kind of thing. I was able to support them in that respect.
Sure, but you couldn't.
On the radio, you listen to them being assulted and just not.
And there's nothing. I understand that, and I wish you the very, very best of luck with whatever you do next, Matt. Do take care. Well, we've got to have a bit of a rethink then. You can't. Well, I suppose you can ring me and tell me why you don't want to go. You don't want to have the right to strike, can you? Also, I've got an idiot's corner for you anyway after this. Today's show has been absolutely riveting. You think this stuff is funny? Yeah, all right. Well, you didn't make me laugh. 11:53, nearly 11:54. So I'm in a bit of a pickle. I've launched a phone-in, and it's just been pointed out that earlier this week I did ask people who don't ring radio shows to ring in, but I don't think that was silly. It's not like the time that I asked people who haven't got phones to ring in, but I've launched a phone-in that you're not allowed to join if you're a police officer, and I'm normally quite rude about retired police officers because they always ring in to blame everything on graduates. So if you're doing a policing phone-in, all the retired coppers ring in, whatever the question is. And if it's in any way saying, why is this bad stuff happening? They all ring in and say it's because of all the graduates, which is not likely to be true. Not in every single case. So at number one, I've alienated retired coppers over the years of presenting this programme. And number two, non-retired coppers, serving coppers, are not, as far as I can tell, not really allowed to contribute to a conversation about whether or not you as a police officer would like to go on strike. I presume you're allowed to ring me and tell me that you don't think you should be allowed to go on strike ever, but anyway, in the great annals of radio phone-in topics, this one goes down in history as one of the all-time worst, I think. It's fair to say that. And it's all on me. I had absolutely no idea. Luckily, I don't think that I am... although you can, of course, as Scott in Stockport, possibly missing the joke I made a moment ago, points out that the LBC app does indeed have a rewind function. Let's hope the serious organised crime squad... Oh, don't make me laugh! Let's hope the serious organised crime squad aren't listening to you. But the one that did make me chuckle during the break was the one that said, "Don't worry, James. If you have broken the law, you'll be fine because the prisons are full," which has managed to knit together. Oh, ow! It's managed to knit together the two topics of under discussion this hour. Jim's in Glasgow. Jim, what do you reckon?
Yes, James, I don't want to make you laugh anymore, but
please don't.
You probably wait a fortnight for somebody to come and arrest you anyway.
Yes, but, this is true.
Your explanation was right about officers of the Crown. You swear allegiance to the Crown. I'm an ex-forces, so it was the same in the military.
Okay.
You swear allegiance. Could you imagine if the Army and the Navy and the Air Force went on strike? So
well, I can actually. I mean, I can imagine it, but and I know you're saying it as a sort of as a bit of a gimme, but if some of what I've learned in recent years is that even though we live in a liberal democracy, I can conceive of circumstances in which we would have completely disgusting people in power, and if they ordered the army to go and kill civilians or something like that, what would it be called if you refused to?
Yeah, well, you couldn't actually say no. Well,
didn't Churchill order? Wasn't there something in Liverpool back in the day? 1919, Winston Churchill was Home Secretary. He sent the Royal Navy up the River Mersey to fire on Liverpool because the police were about to go on strike.
Yeah, and I think it also happened in Glasgow.
Well, there you go.
But I just couldn't imagine it.
No, no.
So if you offer it to the police, you have to offer it to the services.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you have to have a ballot of some sort?
I couldn't imagine they would allow that. But anyway, look at the police in certain areas in this country. you wouldn't see a difference whether they went on strike or not.
Oh, no, stop it.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not. You're not sorry at all. You were laughing yourself at it. So, yeah, all right.
That's how low this country's came, I'm afraid.
Well, you're probably not wrong, actually. The prisons are full and there's a shortage of coppers. And on both fronts, the prison service and the police service, the quality and calibre of new recruits, and this isn't true of all of them, I don't want to offend everybody, but I am constantly being told that the quality and calibre of new recruits is suboptimal and that the absence of experience is very dangerous. And that's going to get worse, not better, isn't it?
Yes, and in Scotland, we've already cancelled the 200 intake coming in January because of they've not got the finances.
Really?
Yes.
What, for the police?
For the police.
Gosh. Well, I didn't know that. Well, you live and learn. Jim, thank you for that.
No problem.
It is coming up to 11:59. I don't know that everyone's taking my injury seriously enough. You'll be back in your shed, James, writes Andrew, with a tag on your ankle. Okay. And Caroline says, are the police allowed to talk about whether or not they should have the right to strike, or about whether or not they should have the right to talk about whether or not they should have the right to strike? I don't know. But I shouldn't. I'm beginning to realise we shouldn't have even gone there, so I do apologise. And Joe in Chislehurst says, just proving that you can never please all of the people all of the time. Please don't call them coppers. Be respectful and call our police officers police officers. We are not in America. Is copper an American thing? I don't think it is. Is it? Surely it's not. I don't even know what the origin is, which is oddly appropriate because it is very nearly 11:59 and it's Thursday, which means, of course, very shortly we will be launching Mystery Hour. And if I don't get a call from someone asking about the origin of the phrase copper to describe police officers, I don't care how upset you get, Joe in Chislehurst. There will almost certainly now be a question about why we call police officers coppers, if it hasn't been done before. And there it is, that little noise in the background, that cheery tune that just started playing means that we are very nearly ready for the 12 o'clock news. And after the 12 o'clock news, we will be launching Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. And I have to tell you, I don't know how I feel about this. I had words with the producer at 11:45. People have started ringing in early to book their place on the switchboard while I'm trying to conduct a high-level adult topical phone-in. Now, admittedly, on this occasion, it didn't matter because no one was allowed to phone me to contribute to the phone-in. But it will be Mystery Hour after this.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 12, and it is time for Mystery Hour, like the man said, and it is your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on the radio. People ring. Look, it doesn't sound amazing if you're new to it. I say, people ring in with questions and other people ring in with answers. But not only is it incredibly... Well, I hope it's not that entertaining today. Is that bad? Can we do a very serious Mystery Hour so that my rib doesn't hurt and you make me laugh? Or, God forbid, that I laugh at my own jokes, as has occasionally been known. There is usually a guarantee, as Keith has just... Thank you, Keith. I normally like to guarantee that you will have at least one laugh out loud moment between 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock on a Thursday, but I'm not sure I'm capable of a laugh out loud moment. At the moment, we shall. So let's try and not make it one of the very silly and frivolous Mystery Hours. Okay, let's try and make it a bit more serious. Like that's ever going to work. I think we'll crack straight on. Don't forget the board game. I was looking at some of the reviews last night. It's about 4.5 stars on Amazon, and there's loads of them there. And what you have to remember is anything I sell on Amazon, you get a few racists turning up to claim that it's awful, even though they probably can't really read books or understand the rules of the incredibly simple Mystery Hour board game. So you can probably give yourself another half a star for that at least. But it's a brilliant game, and you can get your own copy at mysteryhour.co.uk. Or you can win it by being my favourite contributor, which this week will involve not making me laugh. I can safely say that I don't think I'll be giving the Mystery Hour board game this week to the person who makes me laugh the most. Full terms and conditions are available at lbc.co.uk. It's 5 minutes after 12. David is in Surbiton. David, question or answer?
I've got a question, James.
Carry on.
The question is, it's about national anthems.
Right.
And I wondered, is the UK the only country in the world which has a national anthem which is dedicated to a living individual.
Why did you
And
say
by the way,
living?
James,
Are you?
I won't make you laugh
What?
because I'm a very boring person.
No, you're not, David. Not at all. Did I mean, you're almost making me laugh there, which I suspect was your intention, wasn't it?
No, not me.
You said living with
Yeah.
quite a bit of emphasis. It suggests that you know of an anthem that praises a dead person.
No, it doesn't.
Oh.
I don't know. But I can imagine circumstances. For example, let's take maybe Turkey. Where the most famous person in their history is Ataturk, the founder of the nation. So I could envisage
I see
their
what you
national
mean.
anthem
Yes,
being based
okay.
around that.
Yes. So our
the-
glorious founder, almost, our glorious whatever.
Exactly.
So is there another national anthem that praises... a living person is the question. A head of state is probably the... I mean, what about other royal families? Do they not have national anthems that praise the head of the royal family?
The reason I'm asking the question, James, is I don't have a clue.
Thailand. I bet you Thailand. Thailand have...
could be.
They imbue their king with religious significance, as in like a demigod. So that might... Well, anyway, the point is I don't know, and nor do you. So that's why you're asking.
Yep.
Thank you. Do any other countries have a national anthem which praises or is simply dedicated to a living person? May not be praising it, maybe saying he's a right old wrong un. We can't believe it. I'm glad he's dead. That kind of thing. No, living person. Living. 12:07 is the time. Bo's in Bridgend. Bo, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Why don't you ever see a seagull in a tree?
That sounds like the first line of a joke, Bo.
No. Why? I've done due diligence here, you know, and the outbuildings on the floor in a sparsely, but never in a tree. Never seen a seagull in a tree.
I don't know if I've ever seen a seagull. It sounds like a George Formby song now.
Yeah, but you think of this now.
I've never seen a seagull in a tree. I've never seen a seagull in a tree. I've never seen a seagull. I've never seen a seagull. Oh, no, you're right.
Jim, I'm about 15 miles from the coast here, okay?
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a seagull, I'm thinking, right, I'm off down to the coast now to steal some chips, okay?
Yeah.
So I've got 15 miles to go. Surely I'm going to need a whiff and stop somewhere.
You'll have a little rest.
In a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A handy spot. Well, I think you're sort of probably in the process of answering the question yourself. So seagulls,
I don't know.
Well, they live on cliffs, don't they? They roost on cliffs, and therefore buildings that can deputise for cliffs, they will stop on. So it's probably got something to do with predation. So they don't like trees, but they will rest on
I live on a lot of junk food, but if I'm hungry, I'm going to have a salad, don't I?
Well, but you'll go. There's buildings. They don't find themselves in areas where there aren't any places to stop.
So really, you're saying they haven't got the intelligence to think, I'm quite tired. You're landing on a lovely branch over there, landing on tree.
I don't know if it's intelligence. I think they don't like the cover. I think they like to be able to see clearly. That's why they're called seagulls, because they need to be able to see clearly in front of them, and they can't have any leaves or trees getting in the way.
I can see clearly now the trees are gone.
Also, haven't they got webbed feet?
I've no idea how a seagull.
I think they've got. I think that's your answer.
How would they steal? How would they steal people's food with webbed feet?
Well, I'll show you, Bo. Put the phone down.
They got claws.
They haven't got claws. Put me on speaker.
What do you mean? Put you on speaker?
Are you on the phone line or a landline?
Phone line, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, if you put me on a speakerphone and put your phone down and you were talking to me and I said, right, now hold your fingers together so you've got webbed hands, right?
But how do they steal food with webbed hands?
You can still pick up a phone. You can still snatch some chips with webbed feet.
Well, like a baseball glove and scoop it up, like.
Yeah, no, like two baseball gloves next to each. That would be one way. So the answer is webbed feet.
The answer, they don't land in trees because they got webbed feet.
They can't grip the tree. They can only settle on flat surfaces.
Oh, James, you're on dodgy ground.
What do you mean dodgy ground? That's an obvious answer.
I don't agree with your answer.
What do you mean you don't agree with my answer? Do seagulls have webbed feet?
You made that up.
I did not make that up. I worked it out.
You worked it out?
I worked it out.
Oh God! I hope there's an expert on seagulls.
They do have webbed feet. That's why they swim. That's how they can swim so well.
Oh God! Well,
I'm right. That's why you're embarrassed now. Oh my!
I'm not embarrassed.
You are embarrassed. You should be.
I'm not convinced of the argument that they got webbed feet.
Well, they have got webbed feet.
Are you looking at a picture of a seagull there?
No, I'm imagining one in my mind's eye.
Right. Done with it. Yeah. Okay. Then.
All right. Listen. That's why.
In the interest of getting other people on the show, I'll accept your answer.
Well, you don't have to. Also, they grab your food with their beaks, you prune, not with their feet.
No, they don't. They come feet first.
They do not. They come swooping down and grab it with their mouth.
I was down in Devon and attacked by a cornwall no more than 3 weeks ago.
This is supposed to be, God almighty, this is supposed to be a serious mystery, Abbot. You're making me laugh.
It's serious.
It's not serious. It's got feet.
You can... The dense foliage we have now in trees, you could easily land on with webbed feet anyway.
Well, that all right. I'll leave it on the board then. So why don't seagulls land in trees? Thank you, Bo. But it's because they've got webbed feet. 11 minutes after 12 is the time. Alex is in Carmarthen. Alex, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Alex.
I hate to do this to a fellow Welshman, but you're absolutely right about the seagulls.
Yeah, there you go. Webbed feet,
their feet are adapted for paddling. Their feet don't bend in that manner, so they can obviously land on a flat surface, but to grip a branch, which very well may be moving, they're just not capable of it.
So he might as well have asked why you never see a duck in a tree.
Exactly the same. Any water bird, they can't do it. They physically can't do it.
A swan?
Have you ever seen a swan in a tree?
Never seen a swan in a tree, Alex.
Or a goose?
Never seen a goose in a tree. Never seen a gull in a tree. Never seen a tern in a tree. You could perhaps, some of the wading birds have, do they have webbed feet or do they have...
I think most waders have a degree of webbing, but there may be a few. But again, even those you don't see them in trees.
You're not going to see them in a tree. And again, is it true that they steal food with their beaks, not their feet? I think it is true, isn't it? But it's not even relevant to the question.
Again, they've got the dexterity to handle their eggs on cliff tops with their feet. A large stroke. They don't. Of course. They take it with their beaks.
Yes. Qualifications?
Been a keen amateur ornithologist since I was a member of the RSPB when I was from about 8 years old.
Oh, lovely.
And I live by the coast.
I'm a member of the RSPB. Are you no longer a member of the RSPB?
I think it may have lapsed, sadly.
Well, you want to sort that out, mate. They need all the help they can get at the moment. I'm a member of the RSPB. We've got a family membership. Thank you, Alex. Round of applause, please. A lovely answer. So I was just going to do a little bit of a staff meeting now, if that's all right. I specifically said don't put through silly questions or funny callers. And the second caller was Bo asking why you never see a seagull in a tree. I don't think you're taking my injury very seriously, frankly. That made me laugh. Jackson Ipswich. Jack, question or answer?
Hi, it's a question, please.
Carry on.
Why is one side of a bar of soap soft and the other side hard?
What?
Yeah. So I'm a gardener.
Yeah.
And when I come in from work, my hands are filthy.
Right.
So I get the bar of soap. It can be a brand new one out of the packet or it can be on the side.
Yeah.
Put it under the tap, scratch it.
Yeah.
So you scratch the softer side to fill your nails up with soap. Then you get the nail brush and give it a jolly good old scrub and your hands are clean. But there's always the other side of the bar of soap which is hard and you can't scratch.
I just don't recognise. What brand of soap do you use?
It doesn't matter.
Well, it does matter because we use Imperial leather and this doesn't happen with Imperial leather. Don't laugh like that. It does not. Ow! It does not.
It really does, James. It really does. Even when you go to a hotel and you bring back one of those little packets of soap, a little posh one.
I don't think this is true. You've just got one side gets wet.
No, it can be a brand new bar of soap out of the packet. Honestly, I do it every day, and I often think.
I do trust you. I don't think you're yanking my chain, but I think you're mistaken.
No, I don't think I am.
I'm just going to have another staff meeting. All right, just excuse me. Do you recognise this at all? I'd never encountered this. Eleanor, do you know about this soap? You use soap, surely. Have you got one side hard and one side soft? Have you ever? What? Yes, one side's wet and one side's less wet. No one really recognises the circumstances behind your question, Jack.
Well, maybe.
So what brand do you use at the moment? Oh, no, you've already answered that.
Well, no, I've got a Duff bar upstairs in the bath.
Duff?
I sometimes just get straight into the bath.
Yes.
And do my nails there. Or at the draining board in the utility room, I've just got an Asda, bog standard brand of soap.
I don't think it's doing this thing that you say it's doing when it's straight out of the
really
packet.
is.
I think it's because it's rested on one side of the...
It really is.
Oh, hang on. You've got some support. An unsigned text has come in saying, it's true, James, re-soap. But then another text came in at the same time and said, I don't know what she's on about either.
Well, maybe you don't get your hands dirty.
52-48. No, well, we'll find out for you, Jack.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. It's 12:16.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
19 minutes after 12 is the time. The question about whether any other national anthems are dedicated to a living person. Question about, well, we've done the Seagulls question, although I have to say, in Beau's defence, if you follow me on Twitter, you will see that I have just retweeted a photograph, wait for it, of a seagull in a tree. I mean, it just is there, but you can imagine that it's an old tree. And it's almost got a flat surface. Do you see what I mean? So the webbed feet is the reason why you don't routinely see seagulls, or for that matter, penguins, in trees. But there is a photograph there of a seagull in a tree. So my thanks to Gary for sending me that. And then we want to know why the soap is hard on one side and soft on the other. But I don't know if that's true. I mean, anyway. 20 minutes after 12 is the time, and Mick has just sort of taken us back to the beginning of the programme when Chris Moores was encouraging people to send me jokes in the hope that I would laugh and feel pain with my injured rib. What do you call a man with a seagull on his head? Cliff. Sophie's in Leighton Buzzard. Sophie, question or answer?
Question, please.
Carry on.
Why is a scientific calculator called a scientific calculator when it's used for maths and it's mathematical?
Well, it can do equations. Can't it?
But is that not mathematical?
It's also scientific.
What in it is scientific?
You're only allowed one question.
Oh.
Don't laugh. Ow. So, I mean, it does things like, it's got, like, pi on it, and hasn't it, and stuff like that.
So I thought that was still maths things.
Yeah.
Can't use them in science.
Logarithms, trigonometry. I mean, it is all maths. I know. Well, you're thinking of biology and chemistry and physics, aren't you?
Yeah.
No, I think it's quite a good question. I think it's probably just a synonym for fancy. Don't you?
It's just a bit confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think it's a synonym for fancy. I think that you've got all these calculators, and then they invented the one that can do, logarithms, and they thought, what can we call it?
So it's a fancy calculator.
Let's call it a fancy calculator. We can't call it a fancy calculator because that sounds daft. So we call it, let's call it a scientific calculator. So that's what they did.
Well, that's answered that then.
Well, it hasn't, because there's no earthly way I can give myself a round of applause for that. Because there will be someone listening who actually knows the answer to the question. But I would not be staggered if that were part of the answer. Yeah?
Yeah.
You're on. What is it? Why is a scientific calculator called a scientific calculator? I know penguins can't fly. That was why it was a funny thing to say. I can't be doing with this today. Seriously. That's why it was funny. I said, you never see a penguin in a tree. So stop sending me messages saying penguins can't fly. And in fact, you do see a penguin in a tree, but only if someone has put their chocolate bar there. Gareth in Strasbourg. Gareth, question or answer?
I have a question, James.
Carry on.
Natural gas.
Yeah.
We know that normally, naturally, it has no scent. And they add a scent so that you know if there's a gas leak. Right? You with me?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know that natural gas has no scent.
Apparently, so it's scentless, and they add something. They add a very distinctive scent, so that you know if there's a gas leak.
Are you sure? Are you sure about this?
Yes,
Okay.
Definitely. I definitely am sure.
Fair
about
enough.
This. My question is...
Well, I can work out what your question is, I think, from the details that you've provided so far.
What's the smell?
What do they add to gas to make it smell?
Yeah, and is it found in nature? And if so, because it'd be interesting if you suddenly smell gas somewhere and you're in the middle of a forest, because that's where they found the scent.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Because
there could be a ray load here. There's apparently a company in Birmingham that make the scent. So I know that where it's manufactured.
Well, I never.
But I want to know.
Well, does that mean that gas smells different in other countries?
I don't know.
I always remember when I was a kid.
Could be a supplementary.
First time I ever flew in an aeroplane was when a friend of mine at school took me on holiday to Mallorca. And the caretaker of the block of flats we stayed in, you know when things stick in your mind from your childhood because you can't quite believe what you've seen, he was worried that there might have been a gas leak, so he lit a match next to. Does gas smell different in other countries?
That's a supplementary question.
It is. I know it is. But I mean, it's on the board, Gareth. There we go. What do they add to gas to give it its? Is your nickname Gaz by any chance?
It's not. And actually, well, I live in another country, so I can tell you that actually the gas does smell the same as what it... Yeah, I live in France. So, yes, it does smell the same here as it does in the UK.
Well, I mean, we will find out. Are you 100% sure they add something to it?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, it was on a rival... Not a rival show, it's on a Saturday morning show. Frank Skinner, in fact.
No,
and they were talking about the company that add the scent. And so,
probably in Smethwick, is it? In Smethwick, around that neck of the woods in the Black Country?
I think, yes, Black Country, yes.
Yeah.
But, it sounds like a real sort of industrial, because it apparently makes sense for sweet shops and all that sort of stuff as well. They're a scent factory. So if someone from that factory calls in, well, I mean, what can you say?
Well, there it is. Let's find out for you, Gareth. Lovely question. Thank you very much. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. That's quite funny, actually. Hi, James. My 9-year-old son, Oscar, who is homesick from school today, asked me to send you this. Why do seagulls fly over the sea? Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be bagels. Bagels. That's a nice one, Oscar. Get well soon. Jack's in Woking. Jack, question or answer?
Hola, señor O'Brien.
Hola.
Preguntas, por favor. That means question.
I know it does. I know it means question. I was just trying to think of what continue was in Spanish. I can't remember.
I thought you were going to say, ¿Cómo estás?
No, why would I say, ¿Cómo estás? I don't care how you are.
That's usually the English reply.
Is it? ¿Cómo estás?
It is. How you doing anyway?
I'm pretty well,
I've got
actually.
a question for you, young man.
Go on.
What's the purpose of a judder?
A judder?
Generally, after you have a number one.
But I mean, not just that though. You mean a little shiver
that's
got nothing to do with the cold.
People will recognise it from that.
You mean
it's
that?
A completely different feeling. It's not like the whack you get when you're going to sleep.
Yes.
And it's not like a tick. It's a unique feeling, and I don't understand the purpose of it or why we get it.
No, is that? And it is like a. Yeah. Temblar. Is it temblar in Spanish? Temblar? Or it would be estremecerse. I think.
Mijo? I'm not too sure.
No, me neither. I just Googled it, which you're not really supposed to do during Mystery Hour, but I felt that you were questioning my linguistic capabilities a bit.
But no, that is my question. I like it. Completely unique.
Why do you do that little shiver, particularly when you've just done a wee? Why do you do that little shiver? I mean, it might be linked to temperature. In fact, I bet it is, because your temperature probably goes down a bit when you're micturating, because what comes out is hot. So it might be linked to that. We will find out. I don't want to go into too much detail. People might be having their lunch. 12:37 is the time. So why do you do a shiver? What's the point of a little shiver, or a judder, as Jack calls it? What do they add to gas to give it its very distinctive smell? What's scientific about a scientific calculator? That's a great question. Jack's convinced that her soap, every bar of soap she's ever encountered, is hard on one side and soft on the other. I'm not at all convinced by that, but I have left the question on the board because I'm such a nice chap. And David wants to know whether there are any national anthems apart from our own which are dedicated to a living person. Ray's in Vauxhall. Ray, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's a question.
Carry on.
Is there really such a thing, like scientifically speaking, as a seafood allergy? Because I have friends and colleagues that swear they have a seafood allergy and they can't eat fish, they can't eat prawns, they can't eat mussels.
Well, and you just don't believe them. You just don't believe them.
Well, I've not tested this out, but from my understanding, all those things I just mentioned are different species completely. They're not related to each other. The only relation is they all live in the sea, hence seafood allergy. But you wouldn't say that somebody's got a land food allergy and then say that they can't eat anything that lives on the land. Well, that would be nonsense. So what I'm trying to establish is there genuinely a thing as a seafood allergy?
Or you mean everything that lives in the sea? So you could have you'd buy a shellfish allergy, would you?
Well, yeah, specific shellfish allergy. Yes,
but if you're allergic to a cockle, how can you be allergic to a cod? Is what you're asking, really?
Well, yeah, or a dolphin.
Well, no one eats dolphins, mate. This has taken a bit of a dark turn.
No, what a dolphin is a mammal, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And then you've got a fish, and then you've got
a shellfish, a mollusk.
Is a crustacean, I believe.
Crustacean and must.
Then you've got a lobster, which I don't know what that comes under. But,
no, all right then. You're on. Actually, can you really be allergic to everything that lives in the sea?
A seafood allergy, yes.
Seafood allergy.
Described as, yeah.
Are your colleagues quite untrustworthy generally, or is it just on this particular issue that you think they're mistaken or lying to you?
Well, like I said, I've never. When we've gone to a restaurant, they've just decided they're just going to ignore anything that's sort of seafood related and go straight to the meat section.
Might be a better safe than sorry approach, mightn't it? And if you've caught a fish, you might have it in the same box as a prawn, and you're so allergic to prawns that even if you've got a little bit of prawn residue on a fish, it's gonna activate your allergies.
So you're saying it might be psychosomatic? That's what I'm saying.
Not psycho. I'm saying better safe than sorry. That's very different from psychosomatic.
Right. Okay.
But
I'll
it's
give
on
the
the
benefit
board.
of the doubt. But I'd like to know if that is genuinely a medically prescribed thing.
Yeah. All right. You're on. So is there such a thing as a seafood allergy? As in, you're allergic to everything that lives in the sea, all food that derived from the sea. 12:30 is the time. Tim Humphries here with your headlines.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
12:34 is the time. Graham's been in touch to say, I think people who say they're allergic to seafood are just shellfish. Ash is in Northampton. Ash, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on.
Additives to LPG.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, mercaptan is the substance we use.
Mercaptan.
Mercaptan. Yeah, please don't ask me to spell it.
I won't. And they just add that to gas. It's a gas.
Yeah, so it's a sulfur compound.
Rotten eggs. So does
rotten
gas
eggs.
smell a bit like rotten eggs? Does gas smell a bit like rotten eggs?
Low concentration, yes.
Gosh, qualifications?
It's the same additive we use in the Merchant Navy to make LPG safe for carriage.
And you, of course, teach captains.
Yes.
To sail boats, ships.
Merchant Navy ships.
You teach captains then?
Yes.
Captains. Merchants. That doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. And there it is. And so it's created, they manufacture it and then they add it to natural gas that's going to be used for fuel and things like that. And the same on a ship so that you know if there's a leak.
Yeah, if memory serves, it comes from coal. It's a sulfur derivative from coal.
Sounds very likely. I like that a lot. Round of applause for Ash. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, great question, that, and a really good answer. Well done, Gareth, for asking it, and well done, Ash, for answering it. 12:36 is the time. Emma's in Salisbury. Emma, question or answer?
Hi, it's Peter, actually. I was driving, but I pulled over because it was my question.
So Emma rang in to ask it from the passenger seat, and then you got the hump when she got through. So you've literally just taxed her and taken the phone off her so that you get to appear on the radio.
Well, I've been thinking of this for so long. There's a lot
to unpack here, mate. So you just thought Emma was going to be stuck there just hanging on the telephone, not getting through. And as soon as she got... But I mean, this is a bit cheeky, really.
Well, my biggest worry is that she wouldn't convey the question as I would have wanted to convey it.
Stop. When you're in a hole, stop digging, Peter. Honestly.
I know.
Can I speak to Emma quickly, please?
2 seconds.
Thank you.
Hello.
Emma, are you all right?
I'm all good. I can't believe we're on the show.
Are you sure you're okay? Are you sure you're okay? You're not being held against your will in any way?
No, I'm not being held against my will.
Okay.
Have I said it right? Yeah.
Fair enough.
No, I'm not being held against
it is Peter's question.
It is indeed. We had to have a little fight over whose question was going to be on, but Pete won.
Oh, he did win, so okay, that's fine. You can give the phone back to Pete. Thank you, Emma.
Okay.
All right, carry on. Go on then, Peter.
Hello. Right, yeah, so from an evolutionary basis, it strikes me as such a weak spot of ours that we have to take such careful, pay such careful attention to our teeth and brush them twice a day.
Me too, actually.
And floss them and do all this stuff, otherwise they crumble away.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, really from an evolutionary stance, why are they so weak and crumbly? And and from the sugar sort of perspective,
you're allowed what? I should have just let Emma ask the question. You're only allowed one question, Peter. You're going around the houses, mate.
Well, okay, that's my question then.
All right. Well, what is? Why are teeth so rubbish?
Why are our teeth so weak and such a weak spot? It strikes me as such a weak spot evolutionarily.
Well, I think the answer is that we clean them, actually. So if we hadn't worked out quite... Because I've often wondered why we haven't evolved just to have, like, plates in our mouth. Like mashing plates. Do you see what I mean? That don't even have any nerves in them. But because we learnt pretty early to look after our teeth.
But why don't other animals walk around with tubes of Colgate?
But they don't. That's silly now. It's a serious question, this, Peter. I don't want you to... But they do. I mean, if an animal gets an infected tooth, they'll probably die. People in the olden days would die of an infected tooth. But I will. I will try to get you an answer. Why are our teeth? Because they are. Well, I suppose lots of things are evolutionarily imperfect, aren't they? We still die. Why haven't we evolved to be immortal? Why haven't we evolved to not get arthritis? But the teeth are particularly vulnerable, and I've often wondered why we haven't evolved to have more effective mouth-based masticators. Thank you, Peter. Can we change? Because I keep calling him Emma. You've still got Emma on the board. 12:39 is the time. Pratap is in Islington. Pratap, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer to the seafood question.
Fantastic. Carry on.
Yes, the term seafood applies to marine life in three categories. One is mollusks, so you've got oysters, mussels, cockles, clams. One is cephalopods, so you've got cuttlefish, octopus, and squid. And one is
fish.
Yeah, and crustaceans. So you've got shrimp, prawns, crabs, lobster. It is a specific protein in these three categories that is responsible for the allergy, which is not present in regular fish, which is why you have fish as a separate category and seafood as a separate category.
Well, that is very interesting. So, in fairness then to Ray, when his colleagues say they can't have a fish because they've got a seafood allergy, they are mistaken.
Yeah, so they are allergic to fish as well, because you can be allergic to fish and seafood, or fish but not, because I'm allergic to I'm very allergic to seafood, but not fish. So much so that I can't even I can't handle it, I can't cook it, I can't eat it, and I can't even go into a seafood restaurant where the seafood has been grilled on an open flame and the restaurant is filled with fumes.
Really?
However, if it's dried, pickled, or fermented, this process denatures the protein, and at least for me, I can then have dried shrimp, pickled shrimp sauce, crab sauce, things like that.
So you can have a pad thai or something like that.
Exactly. And I found this out quite by accident, and then I ended up doing a bit of research years ago, and then someone had done a research paper on the process denaturing the protein.
What happens, if you don't mind me asking?
So luckily for me, it's not an anaphylactic thing. So my throat swells up, I start sneezing, my throat and stomach hurt for about 4 hours, and life is just generally very, very, very uncomfortable.
And that's your qualification, really, is you've got this
yes,
allergy.
And unfortunately, I'm a chef with a seafood allergy.
Oh, are you?
And as a result, I have ended up in hospital requiring a ventilator on 3 occasions.
Well, I don't want to be rude, but could you not have pursued a different career once you established your seafood allergy?
Yeah, but then I was young, and and I thought I'm just going to power through it, and I'm not going to.
So you're not a chef anymore?
I'm a chef, but I didn't. I don't work in restaurants. And after a certain point, I refused to handle any seafood because I told my head chef, and also when I got older, I told them, "Look,
I'm not doing it. I'm not going near the seafood." Yeah, but if there's seafood in the kitchen, then you're going to have a reaction.
So I usually tend to then work on either in pastry or away from the fish section, where the fumes of seafood grilling, or if someone's boiling a crab stock, then I would choose to work in a different part of the kitchen until that crab stock is finished. A nice crab
stock. You've just made me think of chowder. I do, or a nice bisque. I love a nice bisque. But sorry, I don't want to set you off. Have you watched the TV show The Bear?
I have watched The Bear. And
how good is that?
It's so accurate. One of the episodes on season 1 gave me PTSD.
No way, really?
Because I had, on season 1, the penultimate episode, I had a service exactly like that.
I literally watched that last night. I watched the last 2 episodes of season 1 last night.
Oh, yeah, so the pastry chef throws something at him and walks out. That happened to me on a same night where it was a ridiculously busy service and we just crashed.
And you found it triggering, genuinely triggering.
Yeah.
You poor man. Well, at least I can give you a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. I haven't watched season 2 yet. I'm looking forward to it. Is it as good as season 1?
It's as good as season 1.
Wowee. Wowee. Yeah. Well, happy days. We covered a lot of ground there, Pratap. Thanks largely to you. So thank you very much indeed. 12:43 is the time. Natalie's in Farnborough. Natalie, question or answer?
Question, James. First time speaking to you.
You're very well. You're very lucky, I nearly said. I mean, you're very welcome. Carry on.
Yeah, you're very lucky.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Carry on.
So, 60% of women, all women go through menopause if they live long enough to reach it.
They do.
60% of those will suffer symptoms. So my question is, does any other animal apart from humans go through menopause and get symptoms?
Yes.
Oh. All of them or just some?
Whales.
Really?
Yep, whales. We've had this before, I think. I don't know how I know it, so it must have come up before. And the answer is whales, but also narwhals.
Oh.
Narwhals. Whales and narwhals.
And why not any others then?
That's not relevant to the question. Oh. You're only allowed one question, madam, and I have successfully answered it. Qualifications, can't remember. But it's definitely true.
Oh, so dogs, cats... No.
Yeah, we could be here a while if you're going to list every other living species that's not a whale or a human. but they do. So yes, killer whales.
Oh,
some whales, not all whales, but a lot of whales.
Okay.
Many whales, many whales. What are you making that noise for?
Because it's they don't get help.
No. What you mean HRT?
Yeah.
For whales. Don't make me laugh, Natalie. Come on. I'm going to take them.
Am I going to make you laugh?
No, I'm going to take the round of applause to just drown you out a bit. Go on. Thank you very much. It's 12:45.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
12:48 is the time you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where questions still in need of answers include whether or not... I mean, you can just answer yes to this, but no one can answer no, can they? That's the problem. Are there any other national anthems dedicated to a living figure? In our case, of course, a monarch. A living monarch. Jack's soap question, I don't think is going to work. I'm a bit confused now by that. She thinks all soaps, all bars of soap ever in history have got a hard side and a soft side. And she wants to know why. Scientific calculators, what's scientific about them? What's a shiver? Why do you do a little shiver? Not when you're cold, but like that kind of shiver. Often after having a wee. The teeth question. I think the answer to that actually. Well, am I allowed to do it? Because it occurred to me shortly after. Well, anyway, why are our teeth so rubbish in an evolutionary sense? We've done the seafood question and we've done the menopause question. There's quite a lot to get through. Alan's in Harlow. Alan, question or answer?
That's a question, James.
Carry on, Alan.
Okay, why don't you get red champagne?
Well, you kind of do.
Well, you get rosé, yes, but that's not really red.
No, but there's something called, and I know this, Coteau Champenois. Coteau Champenois, which is a sparkling red wine from the Champagne region.
Well, that's paid to that little query.
No, it's a good question because I mean it is. I don't know if technically they call that champagne, but they do make a red wine a fizzy red wine in the Champagne region. And I think the reason that it hasn't happened historically much is the attributes that make a champagne valuable. It's a lightness and a crispness, which you can even get with a rosé, can't you? Like almost a biscuity. Quite a lot of people use the word biscuity.
Yeah, but then you can see the same thing about Coca-Cola. I mean, that's got a heavier volume than, like, for example, like a lemonade, for example. They still managed to make that bubbly.
Yes, but
that's not a thing I've seen a lot of, to be honest.
No, there isn't a lot of it. I'm very partial to a sparkling red, actually. I think it's very refreshing. But the Coca-Cola point doesn't really work, because you don't judge the quality of a Coca-Cola by the same attributes that you judge the quality of a lemonade.
No, I certainly agree with you there.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
But that is the answer. And qualifications. My old mate got me a. Subscription to Decanter magazine for my birthday, which I wasn't very impressed by, to be honest with you. But what do you get? What do you get? The man that's got everything, Alan, I suppose.
Indeed.
That was the challenge he faced, and I actually read it once in Decanter magazine. So there it is.
Okay, but that's cleared up one of life's little mysteries. I do have another one for you, but we'll save that for another day.
Well, there you go. I look forward to it. Another round of applause for me today. That's quite good. I've done a couple. Mo's in Birmingham. Mo, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
The national anthem. Answer is yes. Jordan is one, as I'm sure of, because I speak Arabic.
What is it in English?
What do you mean?
What's the anthem? What are the words of it?
Oh, God, I can't remember, but I know it's dedicated to the king.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry, I'm Egyptian, so yeah.
No, fine.
It's fair enough. Fair point. I don't know it by heart, but I know it's.
No, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to take you on trust, Mo. You seem like a stand-up guy.
And then there's the Netherlands one is dedicated to a dead king.
Is it?
So that's because William something.
William of Orange. Something. No, that wouldn't be him, would it? I don't think.
Maybe it's William of Orange, but I know the Netherlands. So, and actually, officially, the UK one is not dedicated to a person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's dedicated to the monarch, and then we changed it to Queen when we had a Queen. I think it's Queen Victoria, but it's not really dedicated to a living person. It's dedicated to the idea of a monarch.
Yeah.
And I'm desperate to answer the chivalry one because I'm a doctor and I know that.
You can't.
Am I allowed to answer?
No, absolutely not.
Can I change my voice? Someone else pass the phone to my friend.
No. We had enough of that already today, and everyone's saying we should have let Emma ask her question because Peter's question was rubbish.
Fair enough. Well,
so no, next time.
Answer the chivalry question.
Well, I wish you could answer the chivalry question, but I can't, can I? I can't go around just making up the rules willy-nilly.
NHS clap. This guy.
Well, I'll give you a round of applause with an extra NHS boost.
No,
stop it. Leave me alone. No. Is it a Coteau Champenois is not fizzy? Someone's telling me. I'm sure it is. I or maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. But you could anyway. I've had sparkling red wine at least. Sohaib is in Enfield. Sohaib, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Yeah, but Mo should have answered the doctor one first, so at least I could answer the anthem one.
So you've got the anthem answer?
Yeah, it's the same answer, basically. It's Saudi Arabia.
Okay, what are the words in English?
The words are, God save the king for our flag and the land.
That'll do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's it.
Lots of similarities between our anthem here and the Saudi Arabian anthem.
Love it. Round of applause. Qualifications?
Was on holiday with my parents, late 80s, young. If you remember, broadcasting time was very short. So, just wait for TV to switch on, and the anthem was played every single day. So we'd listen to the anthem every single day until we could watch the cartoon. Yeah.
Perfect. Round of applause.
Thank you.
It's 12:54. You're listening to... Well, you know all that nonsense. Lewis is in Putney. Lewis, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Lewis. Teeth. Yeah, go on. I think I know. Go on.
So it's not an evolutionary factor in humans anymore. So basically, one of my favourite things I read when I was reading it in anthropology is that there was a fossil of an elderly woman, I think she was about 60 years old, and she'd lost all her teeth at about the age of 40.
Right.
And they could tell because the bone had healed over on her jaw.
Wow.
And she'd lived another 20 years. And it's basically because your tribe looks after you under those situations. So if you imagine caveman James and your lovely mother has lost all her teeth, you chew the food for her to keep her alive.
Oh,
basically, the tribe will look after you.
So you could die of an infection, but you could not die of not having any teeth.
More likely, the tribe would look after you in that situation because.
I like that.
And also, the other thing is you probably had kids before you lost all your teeth, so it doesn't actually matter in some respects. But it's still, you're a more attractive male if you've got all your teeth, I'm sure.
Certainly are.
Or female.
But you can't, so, I mean, okay. No, that all makes perfect sense. Qualifications?
I've got terrible teeth.
Have you really?
And a degree in, I've got very soft teeth, according to my dentist. But
and what does that mean? Does that mean that you get a lot of fillings then, or?
Yeah, well, I got to look after them a bit better than your average person, but luckily the company I work for have dental insurance, so it's all for free.
Do they really? Gosh. Round of applause for Lewis with his dental insurance. Go on. Ow, don't make yourself laugh, O'Brien. 12:56 nearly. Thank you for that. Ticking them off today, aren't we? Socrates is in Enfield. Kalimera.
Kalimera. James, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. Question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on.
Right, okay, so the soap question. Basically, I'm looking at soaps here. I've scratched several soaps, and they are equally hard on both sides.
Yeah.
However, it depends on the mould which the soap is made in. So if it's made in a mould which has one surface attached to the mould, so the bottom end of the mould where the soap is placed will be softer than the side exposed to the air. And the top side, which is exposed to the air, will cure faster and therefore be harder when sold. But it depends on the kind of mould.
Okay.
The soap is made in, basically.
So she's kind of right, as in it does happen, and that will be linked to the mould, but it's certainly not true that every bar of soap has a hard side and a soft side.
That's spot on, correct.
What are your qualifications?
I am a soap maker.
What, like full-time?
Yeah, I make soap for a living,
Is it your own business?
Yes, it is,
How long have you been doing this?
About 14 years now.
What made you go into soap making?
It's a long story, but my son had eczema.
Right.
And we were very concerned about the kind of soap and detergent we were using on his body.
Right.
So, we made our own soap.
Well, I don't think I've ever met a soap. I mean, how many soap makers are there around the place? Like you, individual sort of soap makers?
I have no idea, James. But
what's the name of your business? Do you want to share it? You don't have to.
No? Sure, why not? If you don't mind, yes. Soapnut, www.soapnuts.
Soapnuts?
Soapnuts.co.uk,
And this is a reputable business, is it?
Yeah, definitely.
It's not like Chocolate Willies.
No. We make soaps and have done. I've got, I think, 14 different varieties of soap.
That's absolutely brilliant. I'm close to giving you a Ray Liotta. I don't know. Does he deserve it?
Oh, wow. No, that would make my day. Wow.
I think I'm going to give you a Ray Liotta on this one,
actually. Oh, top man, James. Thank you.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
There it is. Because I was questioning Jack's question, but you can't fit quicker than a quick fit. You can't do better than a soap maker on a soap making question, can you? So nice one, Socrates. Take care, mate. Cormac's in Cheltenham. Cormac, question or answer?
I've got an answer for you.
There's two callers from Cheltenham today. Just keeping count. Go on, quickly.
Yeah, so scientific calculators.
Yes.
So there's nothing inherently scientific about them. It's just their capability to handle more complex calculations.
So it's just a way of saying fancy.
Pretty much, yeah.
Fancy calculator. We can't call it a fancy calculator. Let's call it a scientific calculator. That's it, isn't it?
That's it.
Qualifications?
Computer science A-level.
That'll do. Round of applause for Cormac, please. I'm in Cheltenham on Sunday. Still a few tickets left. I'm going to give the prize. It's quite tricky this week. There's a lot of contenders. Sophie, who asked the scientific calculator question, was nearly there, but I'm going to give it to Pratap, just to make up for the chef with a seafood allergy. And he gets the board game. That's it from me for another day. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, Rewind Live Radio, or enjoy the whole show podcast. All LBC shows are there. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick with you at 4. It's time now for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now for Sheila Fogarty.